Today we're going to start talking about Lesson 2. We're basically going to create a static banner like you see a lot on the web. So let's go ahead and see what they want us to build. And if we look in the Lesson 2 end folder and double-click on the Swift file, this is basically what we're going to build. So it's just a static file. There's no animation, no movement at all, no frames that we have to edit. So we're only going to be dealing with graphic images here. So let's go ahead and open up the Flash and get started. All right, as usual, we're going to say new, select a new ActionScript style document, and right away we're going to go ahead and save it. So let's save it. I'm going to save it in my Lesson 2 folder, and I'm going to call it O2 working copy.fla. Go ahead and save that. Now the first thing they want us to do is to change the stage size. So remember, this is the stage, the white area. And to do that, we're going to look at the Properties tab. And I'm going to go ahead and reset this so that we're back to normal. Edit this, and we're going to make this a 700 by 200 pixels with a background color of a light brown, which is, I'm going to go ahead and type these in, CCE 9966. Nice light brown there. All right, there we go. Now, in order to see the whole thing, again, it's nice to be able to see the whole thing at once, but since my screen here is a little smaller, I'm going to view this a little smaller. So we're going to zoom it. Oops. We're going to set the magnification to 100% and see what that does for us. It pushes us off a little bit on each side. So let's change that magnification to just fit in window. Now we'll have everything on the right and left, and that should be pretty good. All right, so we're going to start talking about shapes and fills and strokes and all kinds of interesting things. Flash does things quite a bit different, and their drawing mode is really a little bit difficult to get used to because they have all kinds of ways of selecting not only the stroke or the outline of an object, but the inside of the object. And when you overlap things, you can then select the items in between that. So let's start by creating a rectangle. Let's go over to our rectangle tool, and we'll choose a stroke color that is, they want it to be 663300. It's a dark brown, and the fill color we'll set to be CC 6600, which is a lighter brown. Now let's draw a little triangle. Here we go. A little bit taller than it is wide. And there we go. We got a nice little rectangle. And now we can move that rectangle around. This is has a stroke around it, which is a different color than the internal part. To select it, we use the selection tool and drag around that tool. And the object that we created here was created in object mode. And the one thing in the book tells you to turn off that mode. See, now it doesn't let us edit each section as nicely. And so we're going to go ahead and delete that and start over and create a rectangle. And the object drawing mode is down here. We want to turn that off. Make sure that's off. And let's draw our rectangle again. You'll see the difference. Now when I use the selection tool I can select the inside. I can select just an area, a piece of the stroke. I can double-click and select the stroke all the way around and the internal area. I can even select pieces of this and hit the delete key, and now I have a more complex object. And you can see that I can still select the edges except for where I deleted because there was no stroke here. But that's just kind of interesting what we can do with objects. So I'm going to go ahead and undo all of that so we can get back to our full object. So let's select the object and set the width to be 130 and the height to be 150. All right, so now we've got a piece that we can play with. Next, we're going to use the oval tool, and the oval tool is hidden underneath the rectangle tool. They have all these pieces that we can do. So we're going to select the oval tool. You notice that that is selected. We want to make sure this is off or not selected. And the strokes and the fills is going to be fine. We want to make sure the snap to is selected. It's selected if it's darker background. So that one is selected. Now it's not selected. So we want the snap to. And we're going to draw a couple of ovals inside of here. And basically, we're creating the top, and see how it snaps to the edge of the rectangle. And so we're going to draw a couple of these on the top and the bottom. And then we're going to be able to use our select tool and select pieces of this. So let's go back to our select tool. Notice how now I can select pieces where it created overlaps. I can even select the smaller stroke segments around that. So I could select pieces of this and delete those to make the cylinder, which is what they want. So if I select the inside and hit delete, the fill is gone, but the strokes are there. I can select the side stroke, bottom stroke delete, side stroke and delete. I can also select, and using the shift key, select multiple pieces or segments and then hit them all at once. So now I have a nice little cylinder that I can play with. And next we're going to use the Freeform tool, which is right here, the Freeform tool. So let's select that. And we're going to drag a box around the entire object so that we can play with it. And this gives us little transformation handles that we can play with. So what we want to do is hold the Control and the Shift key down on one of these bottom ones. And notice how the little tools change. And that lets me transform it or deform it into a different shape. So I'm going to make it kind of like a coffee cup here is what we're trying to get to. So I'm going to push in on that. I can use the other ones to make it longer, shorter, whatever. So we'll leave it like that. I can even use this to rotate. So this gives me lots of flexibility in the transformation. We'll click on the outside of that to deselect it. And now we're going to use, we're going to create an inside piece where the coffee is selected. So let's select our selection tool again and click on all of the segments that create that oval at the top. And then I'm going to hit Control-C or Edit Copy, same thing, and then Control-V to paste it. So now I've copied that oval, I've pasted it. I'm going to free transform it and hold the Alt and the Shift key down to shrink it just slightly. So that shrinks the oval while retaining its shape. The Shift key retains the shape or an angle as you're transforming these things. So now let's move that in, go back to the normal selection routine, and move this below the rim of the coffee here. And when you get it close, I can also use the arrow keys to move this down a little at a time because it likes to snap things. I'm going to move it down to right about there. So when I deselect it, now that I've created lines on top of lines, notice how I can select these lines that were created, this inside piece, and delete that. Look at that. Now I have an internal piece that is going to be part of our coffee. And let's go ahead and delete this piece because that's not seen in a three-dimensional view. And now we can start to deform these edges a little bit. So when you get close to the edge of the cup, you see that the arrow has a little arc underneath it. If I select it and try to do something with it, it just moves the segment. So I don't want to select it. I want to make sure nothing is selected, but I want to move close to the line, and then I can pull it out and deform these lines. Make it look like a little bit more of a bulging coffee cup. Isn't that cool? And it only works when I get to see that arc. Let's move it out a little bit. Very nice. We can deform just about everything, make it look like a picture or whatever you want. It's pretty interesting stuff. So now let's change some strokes and some fills. Let's select the paint bucket tool, which is over here, and let's change the properties to choose a darker brown color. So the fill color, where we want this to be a darker brown, it's going to be a 663333 color. And we're going to click on the inside, and that makes our coffee color on the inside. That's pretty cool. Now we're going to select the ink bottle to show how we can change the other pieces, and that's hidden behind the paint bucket tool. And we're going to choose a different, even a darker brown for the color here, and it's going to be a 330,000 there. So that's a real dark one. And we're going to click the top stroke of the above surface. So if we click close to that, you see that that changed ever so slightly. You can see if I do it outside, I'm going to hit Control-Z to undo that. You can see what it does. I'm going to click and undo it so you can see the difference that it makes. If I click inside of here, it finds all of the edges that are surrounded by that area for the stroke and fixes that. So that's the ink bottle. That's a little different. If I click on the inside here, it finds all of these edges here to make those darker. But I only wanted this one, so I clicked right on the edge, and I got a little darker piece there. All right, let's move on to the gradient and bitmap fills. We can change and select make some nice shading for this, which is pretty cool. So let's go to the gradient tool. Let's see. First, we need to select. Let's go back and oops. Undo is your friend. Let's go back to selecting just the area of the cup here, and we're going to choose the color tool palette, color. And again, I like to move these over since we're going to be using this a lot. I move it over into my main palette here so it's always available. And I'm going to select the fill color bucket and select a linear gradient. And you can see already that it makes a nice shading, but the colors are using a dark gray. So we need to change the starting and ending colors to be more of a brownish color. So to do that, we click on this area here on the starting gradient color on the left, and we're going to change that color to FFCCCC. Then we're going to click on the right one and change that color to this odd B86241 color. I'm glad they figured that out instead of me. And now you can see that it's a nicer brown gradient from light brown to a darker brown. And we can change and add additional gradient stopping points here. When we put our cursor underneath the gradient, you see a plus sign. We click there, and now we can move this around, and you see how the gradient changes quite a bit. Let's put it in the center and select it and change that color to all white. So now you can see that the shading, I can have the shading coming from different areas. Let's leave it in the middle because we'll move that later. And let's unselect that, and you can see we have a nice gradient going both ways, nice little shade around the entire piece. And let's select the, let's go back and select the paint bucket tool. Remember, that's toggled between the ink bucket and the paint bucket. And you want to make sure that this is selected, that this is locked. So, sorry, that it's not locked. We don't want to lock that fill. Okay, sorry about that. So let's now take that bucket, and now that we have the grid selected, we can fill a gradient in the back of the cup. So now we have the same kind of a gradient fill in the back. Now let's go and play around with transforming the gradient. Hidden underneath the free transform is the gradient transform tool. So let's go ahead and use that. And we can select the front of the coffee, and you see we have all of these different tools. I can squeeze this a little bit differently, make it the gradient squeezed and darker on the sides. I can move the highlight of the cup, the center of the highlight, one way or the other. So I'm going to move it all the way over here to the left, and now we can do the same with the back of the cup, because these are going to be opposite with shading. And we'll use the rotation tool here and rotate, just pull it over and rotate it at 180 degrees. And you see that now the dark is on the left while the front is on the right. So those are complementary shadow angles, and that's the way that light plays. Let's even move the center point a little bit and squeeze it again like we did before, and deselect, and now we have a nice gradient that matches and gives it quite a good 3D effect. All right, so the next thing we want to do is create a bitmap fill. So let's select the top of our, let's just go back to our normal selection, select the top of our coffee, and we want to change that now in the color panel to go to a bitmap fill, and it's going to come in, and we need to find in lesson 2 the coffeecream.jpg file and say open that, and it automatically populates and fills in that area, giving us this coffee with cream inside of it. Obviously we need to save constantly, so let's go ahead and save, and we've got a good coffee cup now. Now, using the selection tool, let's select all of this, and now we can group these together so that we can play with these as a group. So we go to Modify Group. Now it's a single object, and I can't select the edges anymore. If I want to, I can always go back and modify and say Break Apart, and then I can come back and modify the edges again. So it's always able to go back to that. But grouping things makes it easier to move things around and not destroy the inner pieces. Okay. Now we're going to create a symbol. And to do that, we're going to say Insert, New Symbol. I'm going to call it Line. and it's going to be a graphic symbol. So we select that and say OK. That takes us into a symbol editing mode. You see that we have a scene and we have a line inside that scene. So we're going to create a little line using the line tool here. Check out our properties, and we want to select a hairline style so that it stays that width no matter how we enlarge it. Let's leave the color the same. Well, it's already at the dark brown, so let's leave that the same. And now we can create a small little line in the middle of our stage here. This is creating a symbol. Okay, excuse the coughing interruptions. With the line selected and the Shift key held down, I can draw a small line going vertically. Without the Shift key, you can see I can draw lines all over the place. With the Shift key, constrains it to an angle of 45 degrees or 90 degrees. So you can see that it makes sure I have a completely vertical line there. So I'm going to delete all those lines and come back to my little line here. And next, we're going to click on the scene 1, and that saves it now in this line, in this object library. I have this, or if you look at it in the library, now I have the coffee cream JPEG that I imported, and I have my little hairline that I'm going to use here in a minute. So now we're going to use the symmetry brush, which is under this Deco tool, properties, and I want to use the symmetry brush style. And we want to have the rotate around as the option here. And we're going to just create all right, sorry about that. Let's start over, selecting the line. I'm sorry, the Deco symmetry brush. And the symbol that we want to use here is the line that we just created. So that's what's going to be used in our symmetry. So we say OK. And now when we draw this, you can see that it uses that line that I created. And as I move my mouse around, it does symmetrical lines that I can use for creating some objects here. So they give us a little line here since it's a rotate. So I'm going to match mine to be along these green guidelines. And we can always change these guidelines by clicking on them and moving them, making more or less of these symmetrical lines. And using this one also lets me rotate the entire symbol around. So now I've got my nice little symbol. Select the selection tool again to get out from underneath that. And now I can select and move around my little starburst that I have here. Now we're going to create an oval to go inside of that. Oval, same stroke. We're going to select no fill here. And to do a no fill, we use this box here that has a straight line, a diagonal line across it. That means no fill color. So holding the Shift key down so I constrain it into being a circle, let's create a little oval that I'm going to put inside of my starburst here. Now, it's hard to get right in the middle, so let's use some alignment tools. Let's select all of these and use the alignment panel, which is under Window, Align. And again, I'm going to move this down here to the bottom to show you a different place to put these. And I want to align these, close my little panel here, align these horizontally and vertically centered. So it moved the circle to be right in the middle, which is exactly what we want. Isn't that great? Now we can break these apart and make these into a single group. Since the symmetrical radial lines were created, they are already a group, so we need to break those apart. It's better to have them at their most basic parts. So we call modify break apart twice. We see we have all these lines that are all separate that I can play with. And now that I have them all selected, I can group them all so they're all just one group instead of a group of groups. So now I've got these all. I can manipulate them. I can use the free transform tool to change the size of these. So I've got some little bubbles here. Let's move my coffee cup down a little bit and move my little starbursts here. Copy and paste a couple more. Change the size even more. So I've got these nice little bubbles. Copy and paste another one. Maybe make that just a little bit larger and put it up here. So there we go. I've got 3 little bubbles all created from the symbol radial shape. Save. Nice, good time to save. And now we're going to use the Deco decorated brush. So selecting the Deco brush tool, pulling down to decorated brush, and we want to use a dashed line. And the color is going to be the dark brown again. So let's just use this dark brown here and leave the other values the same. Now when you draw a little line down the middle, you can see that the idea is that they're trying to make it look like steam. And so I could put those over the top of my coffee here, or just draw them in place there to start with. So let's go ahead and do that right over the top. Go back to I unselected this, so let's go back and draw a couple of wavy lines into the coffee. Wow, isn't that beautiful? Now we're going to use the Deco brush again, but we're going to use the flower brush. And using the garden flower, we can select different pieces and colors, but let's go ahead and select the garden flower. And what's interesting is, as I draw, it draws all the flowers for me. Isn't that cool? I can draw flowers all over the place and make just all kinds of happy vines. Isn't that nice? Undo tool is your friend, so let's just draw a swoop of these coming down. Maybe a couple more in the middle here, so that it looks a little more bunchy in the middle. If you don't like it, you always go back, try again. I think that looks pretty good. So let's go with that. And now let's select all of these using the selection tool. Select all of these flowers. You see each one of them is a separate box, and so I could move pieces of them around. But I just want to get all of them, so I can draw and hold the Shift key down and select multiple pieces, and then come up to the Modify and say group them together, or the Control G. Now I can move them around as a group, and that works pretty good. All right, save. Let's go on to our pen tool. Select, we're going to create a new layer. And we could have put each of these on different layers, but for now we're just going to have these different layers for this brown wave. So I'm going to call it the dark brown wave. And we select that so that we know which one we're drawing into. Just like Photoshop, we need to be drawing on all of these pieces. One thing that I didn't do was to create the aroma layer. I skipped over that. So this is something that you can do also. I can create a new layer, and we'll call it the aroma layer. And then I can go to the layer that had that aroma in it. So let's put and select those pieces. And the little stars. I'm going to cut them. And then go to my aroma layer and paste in place. Now, the paste in place means to place it over exactly where it was before rather than the center of the stage. Now my aroma is on a separate layer that I can turn on and off. So I can always have these as different layers, turn them all on and off, which is pretty useful. So now I have my aroma, my dark brown layer is the one I want to use. Let's put it to the top and lock the, now this is where the book I think fails. It says to lock all of the layers, and that's not correct. If I lock all the layers, I'm not going to be able to draw on anything. So I need to lock all the layers and unlock the dark brown layer because that's what we're going to be drawing our wave with. So now we can get to our tool, our pen tool, and start drawing some nice pieces here. Okay. All right. Sorry for the interruption. Let's start drawing some lines. And the pen tool is kind of strange. If you click and click and click and click, then you're going to get square lines. Each of these points becomes a square point. If I click and hold the mouse, I can make a rounded point that I can then manipulate later. Click and hold, and it makes me rounded layers. If I click, just click, it makes a sharp corner. That is, so I have this combination of sharp and round corners. So I'm going to start over and do all rounded corners since this is nice wave. Clicked once to start, once to have the top of my wave, make it look pretty good, and then come down here, click and hold. I can pull these out to make them longer, make it something like that. Click and hold. And this is always kind of fun to figure out where we want these. Click and hold. And don't worry about getting them too perfect. Click for sharp one, coming around the bottom. Let's do a click and hold and shape, and click and hold and shape, click and hold and shape, click and hold and shape, and then click without holding and back to our beginning. That makes a square corner on the right and the left, and that's not too bad. We can always manipulate this later. Let's go ahead and save what we have, and let's select the paint bucket tool. Make sure our properties are set. Let's select a dark brown fill. The stroke doesn't matter. I don't need a stroke, so I'm just going to click inside and fill that. So that's my nice little wave. Isn't that beautiful? Now, once we have the wave, we can edit pieces of these using the sub-selection tool. That's the white arrow underneath the selection tool, sub-selection tool. And I can go and select pieces of this line and move and manipulate these arrow points that I have. By clicking on the points themselves, and then I can move my dragging points, etc. Move this one over to the off the edge, and maybe these a little bit off the edge. So that's one way to do that. If I get close, sorry, still coughing. All right, so the sub-selection tool lets me play with the points themselves. The selection tool lets me, just like I did with the coffee cup, if I hover over the area, maybe you can see it better down here, the little arc comes up. I don't select it. I want to not have anything selected, but get close to it, and you can see I can move these areas around a little bit, which is pretty cool. Let's say I don't want this to be so sharp at the top. Maybe I want this to come over a little bigger, make it look more like a big intestine. I don't know. This is all very interesting stuff. With the sub-selection tool, I can do some additional things like adding and deleting anchor points. So using the pen tool here, I can say add an anchor point. So I can click and add some points and manipulate these later on. I'm going to hit Control-Z to delete those. I can go and use the delete anchor point. Say I don't want this point anymore. I delete it. It disappears, and it rewrites the curve from the other 2 points that were on that line. And I can use the Convert tool to convert an anchor point to toggle between a curved and a straight one. So let's try that on one of these curvy ones. If I convert this to a straight, you see that it goes to a sharp angle. If I click again, it's supposed to go back to a curvy one, and it's not. So to make it a curvy one again, I have to use the Alt key and select that to turn it into a curvy one. All right, so let's undo all that fun stuff, get my curvy back. Now notice that our brown line is above all of the other layers. This goes the same. I can move my brown layer underneath everything, which is what I'll do in a minute. But I like to work on it to see where it's going to be at first. So now we're going to create a little transparency, and we're going to take and select our little intestine here, our brown wave. I'm going to copy and then say paste in place so that it's over the top of itself. And now I can move this slightly to one area, just a little bit, and now I can change the fill color of this to be different. Except I didn't put it on its own layer, so let's undo this and create a new layer. Call it light brown. Paste in place. Offset it. There we go. Now it's on its own layer. I'm not going to worry about messing it up. Let's change the fill color to be a lighter brown. And they're looking for something like a CC 6666. And let's change the alpha property. So to do that, you click on the color box itself, and we can change the alpha property to 50%. Or we can click and actually type in 50. All right, so there we have our 2 colors, and where they overlap, you see I get a completely different. So I'm actually getting 3 colors of wave here, where it goes over the brown, where it goes over the stage color, or the dark brown. let's free transform this and make this a little bigger so it goes off stage, so I get all three of the colors, and that's starting to look pretty good. So now let's move these two below this is my main coffee layer, which I also didn't create. So now we have all the layers going underneath. I got my flowers underneath. That all looks pretty good. You can play with the eyedropper tool to select different colors. I can select, let's say I want a green, and to fill one of those with a green, then the eyedropper tool selects a color. Let's select any color on the page. Let's do a red, and then fill it. Now remember that I have transparency on, so the color is not quite the bright red that you'd think. So to change that, I'd have to make this 100%, and then you can see the pink hue that I picked up from the red there. All right, so let's undo that. I'm not going to change the colors. Let's do our final thing and add our text. So let's create a new layer, call it text. Move it to the top of our screen of our layers and select it. Let's lock everything else so I'm not going to mess around with it. And select some text in the properties, classic and static text. I'm going to select the surfer style, which is this scripty style. Bold, I'm going to make it 42 point, and make it let's make it a blue color. So let's select and say garden, court, cafe, taste the difference. And we can do there's lots of options, just like a word processor. I can center these. I think that would probably work pretty well. Let's go ahead and select the text and center. Go back to my selection tool. Now it's a text. I can move it around. I can put it below different layers. And you can see I have the transparency, which is really interesting. Put it below the dark brown. That has no transparency. Put it all the way to the top, and I think that's what I want. So let's see. What other fun things we can transform this text using the transformation tool. Gives us our bars. I can enlarge it and get away from that specific text size. So I'm going to put it down here, and I think we're done. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And again, it's a good idea just to test it. Let's go through and say test movie in Flash, and there we go. Looks identical to the original, doesn't it? Not quite, but interesting. All right, that's it for today, and I hope you have fun playing around with it. You'll learn a lot just by playing and making mistakes, so go ahead and do that.